Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Feeling and Healing podcast. Today, I am so happy to welcome Monica Weber. She is a stress recovery coach, but she also has had just such a enriching past, and she has been on her path of healing pretty much since birth. Monica has she shared with me her adoptive story. We share that in common. And Monica, I just wanted to ask you, along your healing journey and your growth and being in different relationships, you've told me that listening to your body was key. You were having, very vivid, bodily responses or somatic responses to your trauma. But just explain a little bit more about that, and as well as, yeah, what's stored in the body and your personal experience with it. Because I think, as we just discussed, the body does keep the score. And we have to pay attention to what's going on in order to truly heal what's causing it.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Thanks
Of
for the
course.
kind words. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Um, yeah, mine is a very unusual story because I didn't know anything about my past. I had been adopted and I was in foster care for the first 2 years of my life. And my adopted family kind of went with the children's aid story of, your parents gave you up because they loved you so much and everything is good. And here we were and we welcomed you and everything is good.
Hmm.
And um, yeah, I learned later in life, about 42 years later in life, that that was not the case. But in fact, it was earlier than that because at 18, I had a massive meltdown as well. And it all seemed to be around moving from one house to another. And what's interesting is I was told that I was moved in those 2 years 20 times, which I wasn't really connected to
Yeah.
until my whole world went kaboom all over the place. So, yeah, man, it was, I'm very much a left brain person. Um, what I did for a living was IT. I was very logical.
Mm.
Everything was logical. And then all of this somatic stuff started coming out. I can't even tell you how abhorrent that was and embarrassing that was and awful and I confusing and I didn't know and I couldn't think straight. And somewhere along the line, I was able to get myself to a psychologist, and the psychologist was like, man, something's very clear that something happened to you and
Mm.
something that happened to you where you couldn't get away. And
Hmm.
my somatic response was a collapse response, and I would collapse up to 5 days at a time. So I
Wow.
would lose 5 days
Think of your
altogether.
parents.
And I had no idea what the whole thing was. And as the psychologist kind of took me through the process of, no, you need to learn your tools to keep yourself safe before you go to Children's Aid, because it's pretty certain that whatever happened to you while you were in their care. So through all that, I eventually went to Children's Aid and I recognized that the nightmares that I was having about, and he said it right off the bat, like, I think that your main trigger is crazy people in your space, like people that are
Mm.
reacting in a way that is, that you can't process, that is not, which fits in with so many different things and the nightmares and all sorts of stuff. So for me, it was more of a, it was panic
Mm.
through it. And then when I started learning and being able to connect through my left brain, because that's what I do best, that's my grown-up part of me. Once I figured that out and he kind of guided me along, I looked at it in retrospect and it was like all of these nightmares, they totally fit in with the past that
Mm.
was written down. I mean, thank goodness it was written down, honestly, through Children's Aid, because it matched so perfectly. I used to have this dream about people who were trying to get rid of me, and there was one particular spot in my, what do you call it? My, Children's Aid report that talked
Mhm.
about these people who were fostering me that were trying to get rid of me, and the Children's Aid couldn't take me back, and they were hostile to me, and it's just so authentic. And how can your body maintain that? But at the same time, because I couldn't talk at the time, I couldn't recall it in my mind. I had to play it all back out in my body. People were, they didn't at all understand, nor did I. And it's taken me
Yeah.
well over a decade to sort out like how
Mm.
my body is processing all of this. And you don't make a lot of really good friends when you're going through something like this because people just, man, they don't understand. They just don't.
Mm. Yeah, no, that breaks my heart to hear that, because you didn't even know what was going on in your body. Um, and I know support system is, I mean, I'm very lucky to have a really great support system, but that is something that I always say to people, even whenever any struggle, if you're struggling with trauma, mental health, a stigma, like your support system is, your rock. But I will share that you absolutely are right. When you're in an volatile state like that, I can imagine it being very difficult to make relationships because your relationship with yourself is being an it's an upheaval. That's what basically it just what you described it for me, and you can validate or I mean, let me know if that's what I feel like happened to you. You kind of had this one experience, and then it just took your whole world and put it upside down, if you will.
Yes, 100%. And there were tons of losses in that time because,
Yeah.
man, I mean, it's very hard, and I still try and manage around the collapse.
Hmm.
And that was another thing. Pete Walker's site, when I found I don't know if you know about Pete Walker's site, but
I do.
he also has a book out, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but he has one, maybe two books out, and he was really good. So the doctors, the psychiatrists, were calling what I was doing catatonia because I literally couldn't move. I knew
Mm.
everything that was going on around me, but I could not move. And this could be for days at a time. So the doctors called it catatonia. And when I looked at Pete
Okay.
Walker and the things that he had going on, he spoke very clearly about the fight, four F's is what he
Hmm.
calls it. Fight, flight, freeze,
Yep.
fawn. But I think in that, I thought that I was more a freeze fawn,
Okay.
but collapse, I think, is more to the point of what I do, and this is where people have a difficult time because if something gets to me, and it used to be at one time, it was such a minor thing that could get to me, and I would just drop on the ground. So
Wow.
who wants to deal with that? Nobody really wants to deal with that. I can understand. I can understand that.
No, I mean, of course, but I mean, yeah, I mean, but that's just, yeah, as you said, that was your body telling you danger, danger, I'm not safe right now. That was how your body responded to being unsafe, whether that be what, even if you are in a safe environment. And that's what I always want to share with people is that you could logically, I love that you brought up left brain too. Like logically, yes, you could be, I'm at work. I'm safe. I'm around coworkers. They're not trying to hurt me. But if something happens that triggers that your nervous system, you will react in the way that, might not feel logical, but that's because our right brain moves faster than our left brain. And I'll say it else. I mean, the body keeps the score. That's that's
Yeah.
what happens. You could be in the most calm, even maybe on vacation, and something happens and your body will react and you'll be like, "Oh my gosh," but it's because of that core wound or trauma being re-traumatized in the moment.
100%. And, I mean, this happened to me just over 20 years ago. And at that time, there was not nearly as much information on the internet as there is
Hmm.
now. So, what I drew upon, I don't know if you know of Alice Miller's work,
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so Alice Miller is the one that brought to the table that there was a difference between a one-time traumatic event and a continual breaching
Mm,
with trauma. That's CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress. And, the thing is, I think they still don't recognize complex post-traumatic stress. And I
no.
was going to doctors and I was asking them for help. And when I was trying to research myself, they mocked me and tried to humiliate me for trying to figure out what was going on with me. They meant that I should just do what I was told, take the
Hmm.
pills, and I'm not on any pills at this point. I
That's
haven't
amazing.
been for quite some time. And that's not a judgment on whether someone
No.
should or should not be on pills, but for me, it was damaging. It was not helpful to me. So for me, learning the skills that I learned through the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, through Like Minds, being able to manage my own nervous system, recognize that by planning out my day, so that I could, like in the morning, I have this freeze response and it really impacts me. So I've recently learned that my fascia, which is like I don't know if you know about fascia, but it's like
No.
it's coating over top of our muscles. You
Hmm.
see it in chicken and stuff where it's kind of like a
Okay.
web on top.
Yes,
So
yes, yes, yes.
fascia, when you're in a chronic freeze response, which I was for well over a decade, your fascia gets stuck. So
Really?
even when I'm doing all the right things and I'm, like planning my day out and so on and so forth, physically, I'm still in freeze response. So what
Hmm.
I've been doing in the morning is Qigong type
Yes.
things, slow movement, because I can't manage more than slow movement at this time.
Hmm.
Slow movements and it's starting to release the fascia. And I can feel that because I'm able to do more. My window of tolerance, I don't know if you know window of tolerance, but my window of tolerance is markedly wider now so that I
Okay.
can take in more things. So yeah, nervous system, it seems to be able to tolerate more, but it's always something that I have to think about. It's always something that I really have to work at. I can't just for myself just be a passive part of all of this. I have to really outthink, and that's where my left brain comes in and is helpful. I really have to I have to think about what is going to help me manage day by day because I feel like my nervous system, based on the original injury, it's never had a time of quiet and calm. So I have to figure out what that's going to be for me in order to heal. I don't know if I'll ever get back to where I was before, but man, I'm lucky to be alive, to be honest.
Oh, well, I'm certainly happy that you are alive and you are
Well,
here.
thank
And
you.
I commend
Thank you.
you. I commend you for the work because I think that's another, and I love that you brought that up, that and I know this from the minimal, and actually I will say, like, I have this, I'm studying to be a therapist, so like and we don't learn a lot about like talk about left brain. Like I know the brain in itself and the nervous system from a medical perspective. Like we learn about more theory and healing but we don't learn about like biology and stuff like that. So I'm very interested like in those things, and I told myself that like last year was all about like the brain. I bought all these books about the brain. I was learning about the like just because I just eat it up. And then this
Mhm.
year, this summer, because I live in the Northeast, so summer is my reading time. I'm buying all books about like the nervous system and the vagus nerve and all that fun stuff. So I'm really interested in learning about the nervous system. But from what the little I know about the nervous system is that it does pick up on patterns. And your pattern, unfortunately, was so disruptive when you were younger. It really made that imprint in your body that, as you said, I mean, I commend you for taking such an active role. But that's unfortunately, and I hate to say it to some people, it's a necessity because otherwise your body would probably go back to that fawn res or excuse me, that freeze response that you would, and you constantly would be in that freeze response. As you said, you were in a freeze response for 10 years. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so for me, what I really would have been ahead of the game had when this all first started, I was
Hmm.
aware that the nervous system was impacting me.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting down in front of a psychiatrist and the psychiatrist saying,
Hmm.
well, maybe we'll throw you on some more Prozac or we'll do this, or what do you
Hmm.
mean you don't want to do drugs? You have to do drugs, or whatever it was, that it was always about medication, always.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
how about like I'm telling you that I'm trying to understand what's happening to me so that I
What's
can be a
going on in your
part
body?
so that I can be a part of this, because you don't, I'm here for 10, 15 minutes sitting in front of you, and then I go away, and then
Yep.
my life is absolute hell, and you're
Hmm.
mocking me for trying to figure out how to make my life better. And I gotta be honest, people around me, they have no idea the work that I put into day after
Oh.
day, just trying to stand and do what I need to do. So, that's the thing. Things that I took so for granted before.
Mm.
And they're all very much, yeah, a real trial to do. And I feel like if I hadn't gone through all of the trauma that came from the trauma,
Mm.
if
Yeah.
somebody had have said, hey, this is how you calm your nervous system, this
Mm.
is what you do, this is what's impacting you, you're having these panic attacks, you're dropping to the ground because your nervous system is all messed up. So how about we talk about the nervous system? There was none of that. So this lady that I spoke about who came around and taught us all this stuff, she's the one that helped me
Mm.
understand exactly what was happening to me. And we didn't talk the brain so much. We talked about how to manage a day and to make expectations where, man, what do I like to do? And can I
Mhm.
tolerate that? And the
Yeah.
window of tolerance, and how if I'm pushing myself, and damn it, I'm not going to let this get to me. Man,
Hmm.
that's just walking into trouble all over again. Just to be able to settle down and go like, what am I doing for self-care? And I was horrible at self-care, and I was
Hmm.
excellent at self-harm because I drove myself into the ground. I didn't cut, I didn't do things like that, but I'm telling you, there was no mercy for me. I was going to get out of this situation, and that's all there was to it. So I was literally causing my nervous system to keep collapsing and collapsing because of my own expectations, because I didn't know better. Once I
Yeah.
learned better, then my language all changed, and it was like, okay, so here we go. Now I'm not going to put myself in this situation where I keep collapsing because clearly something is wrong here. So I have to be aware of what that is, and I have to treat myself more kindly. That was probably an ask for help. And that was
Yeah.
probably the hardest, those were the two hardest things coming from abuse the way that I was. I had been
Mm.
trained never to ask for help, and certainly never to give myself any kind of a break.
Mm. Yeah, essentially, I mean, from what you described, like because you didn't have the tools, you didn't have the psychoeducation, you were essentially making yourself worse. I hate to say it when you didn't know.
Yes.
Because and that's what I've found with doing work with nervous system. And thank you for sharing that. And because I want to be
Hmm.
the type of coach and therapist, I do a lot of that people listen to their bodies. And I love that you brought up kind of that window of tolerance because I think it is I always say we have this brain and we have this nervous system and they're both wonderful things, but sometimes they don't work in tandem with each other, and our brain will be telling us one thing logically and then we'll be feeling something. And let's be honest, we live in a very like overstimulated world.
We do.
If you continue, I always tell my clients, like now, I'm like if you continue just to push, like I don't mean this to say like, cautionary, but I know from my own experience because I've had similar, not big T trauma at all, but just being in a hyper aroused state and stress and hyper vigilance for too long is not good
Yep.
for your nervous system. So then my coping mechanism, because like you, I didn't know at the time that I was in that activated state. My coping mechanism was just to ignore it and push through it. You can't, that won't work. It won't, because your body will literally tell you no. That's what happened to me. It told me no. I went through a really bad depression, similar to you, panic attacks, and that's when I had kind of looked at my life and said, what's going on here? Like, and it wasn't trauma
Yes.
based, but it was nervous system. My nervous system was telling me, like, you have to stop until then my body, I mean, I will say I'm not, I think, I don't know. I think it depends on the level of anxiety, but I feel like I'm more of a either flight or fight person. It depends on the situation
Hmm.
of what my anxiety or stress response is. But for this one, yeah, like it was like like similar shut down, like wasn't sleeping. So I think, yeah, I love that you brought up kind of and it's so hard, staying, learning all this because nobody teaches you this when you're, when you're younger. Nobody says, "Oh, what's your window of tolerance?" So, and I'm thankful, and I think as and I know you mentioned, and I don't mean to ramble, but the complex PTSD. PTSD is something that I believe is of course, in the DSM-5, but I feel like in future um, manuals, we are going to see a special diagnosis for complex PTSD, excuse me.
And I would say it's about time because I think Alice Miller's works came out in the 80s. That's a
Mm,
long time ago to not recognize something that
mm,
is, I mean, when I started showing, symptoms of triggering and so on and so forth, man, I was collapsing over everything, everything. So it was really hard and when I did start learning about PTSD, it was like, okay, so you're in a car crash and you're nervous about getting back into a car again. That does not match what's happening with me. And because it was nothing in the DSM, which was all I knew at the time, then it was
hmm.
like, well, how could the doctor have said that I have PTSD? This is well beyond PTSD. Once I
Yeah.
read, and that's the whole thing, like now the internet is full of all these wonderful resources, which sometimes can be too much. Because when you already have an overwhelmed system,
Yes.
nervous
You
system,
don't want
and then you've
more.
got all this information that's blasting at you, like, man, that can be shut down in and of itself. So it's nice
Absolutely.
to be able to go to sources that have already been through it. Pete Walker, he's got great lived experience. I
Yes.
had a psychologist in Toronto who this is a different one than the first one. She had been through her own stuff and she was unbelievable in
Mm,
being able to help. Lived experience is something that, man, you can't teach it. And it's so
no.
important. It's so important.
Oh, absolutely. I will say too, that's another I'll share with you. Like, I'm a coach and I work with people from my own story, but that's why I wanted to expand my knowledge and become a therapist because I was like, I had this experience, and also too, I had struggled with minor, anxiety throughout my whole life and my adult life, and I kind of was like, and I was the only one, and similar to you, I was adopted to one family, was I was in the foster care system when I was younger, just for about 6 months, with
Mm-hmm.
I believe just kind of like in an orphanage. But
Mm-hmm.
as I got older, as similar to you, when you form your new relationships, of course, now I know a lot about attachment style, and I'm
Yeah.
anxiously attached and learning to work through that. Like, just my own self-discovery inspired me. I was like, this is the path I want to go on. And that's because, like because my own is that my own lived experience. I want to help other people kind of figure themselves out because when once you have, and I'm never going to be an expert on myself, but as I've gone through my own healing journey, my own mental health journey, like I'm not saying life is always going to life. I always say it's always going to throw things at you, but when you have the tools, it's just a little easier to manage, and you know yourself and you know your body, and then you also don't take things as personally. Um, throughout life and as I'm growing. So that was a big thank you for bringing that up because the lived experience is something that, when when somebody has felt similar to how you felt.
Yeah, and it's, I think, one of the most, I'm going to say, comforting things was when I was, excuse me, when I originally found my first psychologist and I went in and I was like, I am losing my mind. I am completely losing my mind and it's terrifying to me. And it was. There is, yeah, that wasn't, hyperbole or anything.
Yeah.
And,
No, I
and
mean, yeah, you were probably, yeah, like, I mean, I can imagine that was back when maybe the mental health wasn't as like advanced because I know too, a lot of the trauma work and research that are doing now, I mean, they're basing chronic illness and pain evidence-based studies back to trauma. So I wish that
yes,
you maybe had the resources that are of today. I think we're going in the right direction because, you know, instead of labeling you as crazy or you're out of your
yeah.
mind, it's like now I think maybe I would hope if you went to a psychiatrist, a psychologist now, and I'm so happy you found that one psychologist to really look at your history and your life and be like, whoa, 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 like something is going on here. I
Well,
think,
I think an important part of what he taught me was, and to this day, I'm really thankful. Number one is a comfort that he gave me insofar as saying, hey, you don't just go crazy. There is
yeah,
something
yeah,
that
no, yeah.
happened to you, and this
Hmm.
is following a trauma-based response.
Yes.
So that really helped, that it wasn't just like something that switched in my head that was like all of a sudden I've got this crazy gene. That was an
No,
important
yeah, no,
thing
no,
to know,
no, yeah.
right? So that was helpful in a lot of different ways. And I think really just recognizing that I needed to build up my toolbox of things before I found out what, like, I'll never forget going into CAS. I remember calling them and saying, listen, I've got serious health problems right now because of this. So I'm
Hmm.
requesting to see my file. And he had told me that I needed to wait. I needed to learn all these things. And when I went in, the stuff that I heard that had happened to me, I can't even tell you the response, like the deep primal response
Mm.
was out of this world. And I guess it was triggering all of the stuff that I had been replaying in my night terrors, in my flashbacks, in my drop attacks, and it was like, holy cow, had he not warned me about that? And this is where lived experience is helpful too, right? If someone comes to me and says, like, hey, I've got this stuff going on and I really want to sort it out, well, you might want to think about you need some tools first to learn how to ground, to learn how to
Yes.
like just make sure that you're able to know where your limits are. Because if you
Yeah.
don't know your limits, man, the damage that can be done is really pretty incredible.
Unfortunately, yes. That's and that's like, as you said, it's kind of like trial. Unfortunately, the best lived experience that I've experienced, pun intended, is just like trial and error. And as you said, nobody just goes nuts. Like, and I'll be honest, like, I mean, I've had situations in my life where, yes, I've been triggered. And look, obviously hindsight's 2020, and I look back on it and I can trace it back to like a core wound that I have. And that's how important. And I'm so happy you were able to get that file. But also too, I would love to know your insight of 'cause it's really hard from what I understand as like I'm looking this as from a therapist lens, not being re-traumatized in your experience trying to heal with your trauma. How were you
So,
able to work through that?
yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm going to say that, yeah, I insisted on working through that. I
Mm.
insisted on knowing things. And I think part of that
Mhm.
was because part of my initial meltdown was the fact that my parents knew what had happened to me. They had since passed away, but they didn't tell me what had happened to me. So there was all of
Oh.
this violence between the ages of 0 and 2 years old, I was coming to them. I was collapsing all over the place. I was like biting myself. I was crying nonstop at nighttime for a
Mm.
year and a half when I came to
Wow.
them. But it was all just put across as it's good. You were good.
Mm.
They
You
just
were.
gave you up because. And man, I remember when I was collapsing originally, my brain felt like it was defragging, like literally defragging, because I didn't understand whether my parents knew and why they didn't tell me, because it put me in
Mm.
such a bad place, a bad position. So that's a long way of saying that it was really important to me that I knew the truth because I had felt so betrayed by not being told. And I felt like if I had been told, I would have made different life decisions. I would have
Mm.
rethought having kids at the age that I had kids. I would have rethought um, I would have definitely gone to some form of therapy. I would have done a lot of different things. So for me, I'm going to tell you, I went right into it and I had people say, therapists say, you are going to re-traumatize yourself. And I was like, I'll know if I re-traumatize myself. This is what I'm
Huh.
driven to do. So I think
Wow. Okay.
Kathy O'Brien, I don't know if you know of Kathy O'Brien, but Kathy O'Brien, she has a great book too, PTS Time to Heal, TIME, that talks about being able to center yourself back into your higher brain by while you're healing, looking at time all the time, because time is a
Oh,
construct and
yes.
it's a construct for the higher brain. So if you want to get out of your lower brain, go into your higher
Mm.
brain, and that takes you out of whatever it is that maybe you're doing somatically. Anyways, she talks very much. I lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good. What was the author's name again? Just so I know.
Kathy
Kathy?
O'Brien.
Kathy O'Brien. Okay.
Kathy O'Brien. And I have to warn you, her story is very intense.
Mm.
Yeah, she was part of a sex trafficking
Oh,
thing,
gee.
and it's very political. She also has a book out called Transformation. But insofar as healing, I'm going to say that healing her PTS Time to Heal is an
Yeah, I see it
excellent
right here.
resource. Yeah, it's an
Oh, that's
excellent resource.
amazing.
So for me, I was very, who cares? I just need to get through this because it was a life-threatening thing that was happening to me, and I
Hmm.
had to not worry about whether I re-traumatized myself. It was six of one, half dozen of the other.
Mm.
So for me, whether I was warned or not, and I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but that's right. With Kathy O'Brien, she was like, everybody has an internal knowing of what
Mm.
their path is in healing. She's very, very strong
Okay.
in that. So for me, it was like I just had to be a bull in a china shop and get through it because it was either I was going to heal or I wasn't going to make it, one or the other. And
Wow.
other people, I'm going to say they have the flexibility of being able to go, you know what, maybe I should listen to my therapist and figure out whether this is too much for me.
Yeah, no, and I just want to also like commend you and say that you're just so brave of having that mindset of like, yeah, this is probably gonna re-traumatize me, but I'm willing to do the work because I want to live, I want to heal. That is so brave.
I'm not sure if it was bravery. I thank you for that, but I'm not sure that it was
No.
bravery so much as survival. It's either it's going to work or I'm not
Mm.
going to make it through this. So I'm not sure
Mm.
if it's bravery that compelled me or just a survival instinct that was, and through my 0 to 2 years, it appeared that I was all focused on survival. So I think that was part of my pattern as well was,
Mm-hmm.
like although I had a learned helplessness piece to me, that the strongest piece was surviving. So
Mm. Well, I mean,
it's
and
it's
essentially, like,
fascinating.
we are built. I say this to everybody. I say this to my clients because I like to get my clients out of what I like to call like survival mode. Like, like because that's when you're in an
Yes.
activated state, the four Fs that we discussed, because we
Yeah.
live in a world where you could be put into an F. I mean, by just checking your phone. I mean, we live in that
Yes,
kind of world now where like yes, we don't live in the world of the primitive where a lion or a tiger is going to be chasing you, but our bodies don't know that. Our bodies don't know. um yeah, I mean, I feel like, anytime somebody takes that moment in their life, I see it as brave. So please accept my compliment of
I
that
do.
you were, because
Thank you.
I don't think people, and as going back kind of full circle to what you were talking about, I don't know unless you've done the work yourself. And I always say you got to do the work, got to do the work. And I don't think sometimes people pick that up sometimes, no matter where you are in your healing journey. Like you could be very, have suffered like Kathy O'Brien and yourself, like very, I would call big T, like life
Yeah,
altering trauma, or you could just have some maybe little T. I feel like all of us kind of have maybe some little T hidden in
I
there,
agree.
depending on relationship situations, but we're all, doing our best. But I always say to people, like, do the work. And sometimes people look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm and it's like conversations like these that are
Yeah,
so refreshing, because this is the kind of work we're talking about. It's like, how do you want to know yourself well enough, past, present, and potentially future, to navigate this life in a way that you feel like you can actually live it?
yeah,
It's simple but very complicated getting there, because they're all, as you said, there you have a toolbox, like similar to, like, and I know too, you're big on skills, not pills. I love that
yeah,
saying, and having
yeah.
those, cognitive behavioral techniques, or dialectical behavioral techniques to, you can get yourself out of a state. And I love, you mentioned also grounding. I say this all the time, like, because people say, oh, grounding, and I'm like, grounding is not a trend. Like, because I feel like people are like, oh, grounding, like meditation, mindfulness. I'm like, no, like it's good just to focus on your breath, go out in nature, go outside, feel take off your shoes and feel the ground and the dirt and the grass on your feet. Like, that's great for our bodies and our minds.
Well, which is good for people, I think. There was a period of time, a very long period of time. I had been terrorized, and I was terrorized for about 3.5 years everywhere I
Wow.
went. So to be able to go outside was not an easy thing to do, and I
Wow.
couldn't do it. And it
You
took
couldn't
me
even
a
sit
very,
there.
very long time before I could. And even now, I'm very sensitive. I
Mm.
go sometimes for a walk at a botanical garden, and I go
Hmm.
there specifically at a time where there aren't going to be classrooms of kids that are
Mm.
wandering around, because it freaks me out still to this day. So, and mindfulness, I mean, people used to talk to me about, like sitting down and meditating, and man, I can't meditate because
Neither could I.
the minute I started meditating, flashbacks would just take me. So
Mm.
there has to be like I get that there are standard things that people say to people, like being able to do this and being able to do that. But there is also very, very different things that affect people, and this goes back to Kathy Bryant or O'Brien, I think, and that is you're going to know. And if you
Yes.
say, I had quite a few people that would try and push me to do things,
Mm.
and I'm like, absolutely
You're like,
not.
why am I?
And they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh,
You know
you're
yourself
not going to
best.
get better. And I'm like, I don't want that kind of energy in my space. I'm telling you, I can't do that. And I'm not interested in people mocking me. I'm not
Mm.
interested in people telling me what I need to do. You have no idea. And man, we had in Ontario, where I live, they have a hospital, CAMH,
Mm-hmm.
Canadian, yeah, CAMH.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a program there, and they were horrendous to me insofar as telling me that I had to do this and I had to do that. And I'm like, no, man, nobody's going to tell me what I have to do. I don't
No,
care whether
yeah.
you're experts in anything, I don't care. So I think that's an important part too. Don't give your agency over, especially if you're
Mm.
highly traumatized. Don't be giving your agency over to anybody. And for anybody who's a therapist, absolutely do not push somebody to do something that they feel unable to do. because
Yes.
man, you
Yes.
can damage them beyond,
Oh,
I don't even know how. And I didn't realize I'm quite stubborn.
it's
Uh,
okay.
and I'm going to say that I got into a few incidences where people were attacking me because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And I'm very happy that I kept to what I felt was right to me to do, regardless of what other people said. I think that's an important thing as well in healing is to get your agency back up. I think with
Yeah.
PTSD and certainly complex PTSD, I ended up my agency, which I was very strong in up until I started showing, this breaking apart.
Hmm.
I was very, very much committed to my own agency, and I had to hold on to that.
Yes. I love that. I love that you brought that up because everything, like, of course, your mental health professionals, like when you seek help, you're asking for help, but if it doesn't, just because it might work for the general population doesn't mean that it's gonna work for you, and you have to find what works for you. And we even talked about, you said like medication. Like I feel the same way. It's like I always say to people, whatever works. Like for me, talk therapy really works. I process by talk, but for some people, like they're not into talk. They don't want to talk about their feelings. Like I could talk about my feelings
Yes.
all day. I could sit here and talk about, but like some people, that's not their thing. Like even with therapy, people are like, oh, like you just want everybody to be a therapist because you're going back to school to be a therapist. I'm like, that's what worked for me. Like therapy
Yes.
worked for me, but maybe it's a coach, maybe it's somatic healing, as you said, maybe it's something else. I don't know, maybe it's I don't know, something that, is maybe not as clinical. Like would you find what works for
Yeah.
you and then implement that? Or honestly, and sometimes maybe it's just a really trusted friend that you talk to every once in a while, and maybe they're able to hold that space for you. You don't have to get therapy in order to you could heal. Like you, as you said, you have agency over your own healing journey.
Yes. And exposing yourself to somebody who is not respectful of that wall that you have to put up
Mm,
for yourself. It's not wall that I'm looking for. What is the word that I'm
like
looking
a
for?
boundary or
A boundary. That's
yeah.
exactly, I don't know why that, thank you very
Okay,
much
no
for that.
worries.
But
Boundaries live
putting
in my
up
brain.
that
Like, all I talk
boundary.
about is but the model of therapy is all about boundaries and hierarchy. So boundary is always in my brain.
Yes. And I feel like people who go into therapists sometimes feel like, they don't have to have boundaries. I think you do have
No,
to
you
have
do.
boundaries,
Absolutely.
especially when you're in a therapist's office and any therapist who expressly wants you to not have those boundaries and not respect those boundaries. I feel like that kind of therapist is not a good one to have. That's my thought on it.
I mean, I would agree with you. And I don't want to say there's good and bad, but, and you also too, similar with therapists, I always say, like, I always say it's kind of like dating, finding a therapist sometimes. Like, you might not hit it off with the first one, maybe not the second one, maybe the third one. Like, like find that person that gets you because if they don't, and I love that you said, like, come into the room kind of with those boundaries because,
Yeah.
also too, I found as the other person sitting in the other seat, I mean, I love when people come in and they just pour out to me, but but also too, I respect those people that maybe they're not. It's up. I would say my clients, and I meet my clients when they need to be met. If you don't want to talk about your trauma, I'm not gonna force. It's about the person. So if you have
Yeah.
somebody maybe, and I get it too. I know when to maybe, and it takes that building that therapeutic relationship to know when you could maybe challenge this person. But if you don't feel comfortable, I would say with a therapist, like maybe in the first like couple months, like I would say maybe look for another one. Because that should be, and I hate to use the word should, but that should be your safe space. That should be that person that sees you and knows how to work with you. And that's built that, and that takes time too. It's going back to the PTSD time to heal. Like it takes time to unpack this stuff. So I always say to people too with therapists, like, give them a couple tries before you like fully commit. You know, it's kind of like dating, you know.
Agreed. Yeah,
Um,
agreed. Yeah, and that therapist should be teaching you. And yeah, I think should is important here, although you're right. I don't like
I
to
know
use the word
I don't
should.
like to use the word should, but
There
it
should be an expectation, though, that that therapist is encouraging you to have boundaries,
absolutely,
especially in that room, right? Because if
absolutely.
you don't have boundaries within that room, how can they teach you to have boundaries
It's
outside of the
like
room? That's
exactly.
the whole thing, right? You don't want an ego-based therapist who believes that they know better for you than you do. You want a therapist who teaches you to trust yourself insofar
Absolutely.
as what's good for you. Do you think that's good for you? Does that feel right to you? That type of thing. So,
100%. And I will say it is about like I say this to my client, like even I as a baby therapist because I'm interning right now. Like I mean, I'll have
good for
sometimes
you.
and I'll share like this with the world that there are, and I'm not sharing any client information. There are times as therapists that we sit in silence in the room and I don't fill the room. I don't fill it with anything. I sit there and we just sit in silence and I just when, you know, and I say like this is your time. This is not
Yeah.
my time. Like I am here for you, but there are times, and that's what I say when like in those moments when maybe we say like, you know, so maybe that would prompt them maybe to say something, but I always reiterate like this is your time. Like I'm not gonna sit here and force something. I lead from you. You like you tell, you know, like so that's my style. I know I've heard stories of people, you know, who unfortunately have had bad experiences with therapists where they're maybe a little too pushy. Um, and that
Yeah.
breaks my heart because that's not how I'm being trained. I'm being trained very like, and that's actually, I will share with you, one of the, like, as a therapist, and most therapists, and I know for me as a marriage and family therapist, we have like a code of ethics we need to follow. That actually, like, if somebody thinks we violate that code of ethics, they could report us and we could get our licenses taken away. One of those ethical principles is actually client advocacy and not taking away, as you were talking about, the client's agency and their advocacy in their own process. So we have to like we're like actually like kind of ethically bound to, I mean, at least me, a marriage and family therapist. I can't speak for other therapists, but we're ethically bound to give you guys that autonomy, to give our clients that agency, because if we don't, we're actually being unethical.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to
Yeah.
hear.
I mean, I know you're in
Yeah.
Canada but it's different, but at least in the States and most of our when you're licensed, you do have a, you know, ethics board because it, you know, that's what it comes down to. It's like we don't that's not the experience. It's not about us sitting in the chair. It's about the person who's healing.
And that's it exactly. And recognizing, I have a friend who they have a difficult time speaking when they're in therapy and they feel
Mm.
a great deal of shame in
Oh,
in that process. And when someone has a great deal of childhood trauma, you don't know what got them there. So the
no.
chances are, like perhaps there was a parent who made them feel shameful anytime they tried to speak, anytime they
Mm-hmm.
tried to say that there was something wrong. And there are so many different ways that a person can be bound inside of themselves that isn't even obvious to them as to how they got in there. And that's the whole idea, right? Is to let that unwind naturally. I have someone who is a dear person to me. And when she started going to therapy, she said that the therapist asked, so, what kind of rules did you have to follow? Like, what kinds of things did you have to follow within your family unit? And she had never given thought to the fact that that was, in fact, the way that it was, that there were silent rules that
Mm-hmm.
meant you never crossed your father for any reason whatsoever. And if you did, there was all hell to pay. So that's a clue that, man, there were things that were silently directing you that you weren't even aware of, that if you even managed to say something that was negative towards this authority figure, that
Mm-hmm.
man, your life would go to hell. So you just
Yep.
never did. And you take it as just, man, you don't even notice that it's happening. But then to be able to unravel it, you need to question, why couldn't I say anything bad about my father?
Hmm.
I don't understand why that is. What is that? And then you recognize that that's your father's damage. And consciously, if you want to undo that, you can undo it by not going out and automatically like just wanting to say bad things about him, but recognizing that this was a damaged part and that you should be able to say things that help you in your world, in your life, regardless, without having someone jump down your throat about it, especially someone who's an authority figure.
Oh my gosh, it's so I don't know if you've heard this of this book, but we've been talking about a lot of books because I know you've mentioned books. I
Hmm.
just finished the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Ah, yeah.
Have you read that?
I haven't read it, but I've seen
Yeah.
it, and man, it really, yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
read it.
I mean,
You,
I will share with you and I'll share with the audience like it's not so people I actually had somebody I would like talking to I would say it's a very like anecdotal. She explains a lot of her cases like very of course they're all confidential. The names are changed. Like just different scenarios, but and she outlines the four different types of parents. Forgive me, it's like the emotional parent, the driven parent, and there's two more. I it's like I literally just it's a very easy read
hmm
and I will share with
hmm
you for you like I don't want to re-traumatize anybody, but for me it was a very the tone was very warm. I don't think I mean from where I sit,
mm,
I can't I mean it was because I understand when people want to read that, you might be re-traumatized. You know, you don't want to maybe
right,
go there, but the tone
right.
was very warm. It was very like storytelling. Extremely validating. Went through, different like whether you're an internalizer or an externalizer, but I will say like nothing like you probably don't know, but a nice refresher to and I love that you brought up that story about your friend because and as me as a family therapist, our families and our systems and our parents have so much to do with how, and as we're both adopted, of how we
Yes,
walk into this world.
yes.
Spoken and unspoken. And as you grow through adulthood, as your friend is figuring out, you kind of figure out, you're like, hey, that was something, or hey, I like it this way. Why? And I love that your friend is on that journey because it is that's all that I do as a family therapist, trying to see how our system impacted us to who we are today.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that helps with generational trauma. If I am aware
Hmm.
as a
Yeah.
parent or a
Oh,
grandparent of the things that run in the family that are damaging, then I can look out for it with
a
my
hundred.
grandchildren, say, or my children, or I can have a discussion with my children about things that have impacted this family along the way. So,
Oh, you're picking up everything that I like to talk about because unfortunately, I mean, and I will share, I mean, I'm sure like you thankfully, like you're a cycle breaker of that's what we call you in, the mental health world, is that you saw a pattern in
yeah.
in yourself and also because I'm sure you know multiple caregivers when you were younger, but you saw this pattern and you were like, nope, I'm gonna stop it. So, because we more studies are showing, even when you're pregnant, carrying your child, of the impact of your level of anxiety, your cortisol levels will be ingrained in somebody else's nervous system. And there's another book I'll plug. I'm sure you've heard of it. It didn't start with you.
No, I haven't heard of
Oh,
that. Who did
okay.
that?
It's actually Mark. It's actually a very Mark Wolin, I believe his name is.
Hmm.
And it's a book about that. It's about how hidden trauma from ancestors can be carried through generations. And it's a very, very enlightening book. I love it. So yeah, it's a pretty like it's a pretty and the state.
Interesting.
Yeah, and how people have inherited trauma and the epigenetics around it like that some trauma can like go into your DNA. Like that's how deep some of the stuff goes. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, my parents, they both were raised in Germany and they were raised like their first years were in World War II. So,
Exactly.
I think
Looking
about
at the
that
cultural,
and
yep.
when I recognize the damage that they did to me, I'm like, well, I don't know what it was like for them as 5-year-old children to have like bombs going off all around them and their parents be absolutely terrified for their lives. And like, I don't know what that feels like. So I can't blame it on them.
Of
But
course.
in recognizing it, that doesn't mean I don't get angry about it, but
Of
in
course.
recognizing that, I recognize that although I didn't cause it, it is my responsibility if I want in this family, for it to change and to stop. But of course, that means that my children need to be on board with it. And because they don't
Hmm.
actively have trauma, I don't think they recognize how important it actually is to recognize these patterns in the family. They are so busy doing their day-to-day life and day-to-day world. And I think that's how we're programmed is to just keep going and going and going. And then all of a sudden, as what happened to me, you just crack into a billion pieces. And then you start pulling the pieces back together again and try and get the best facsimile of yourself back again, which is impossible. What I've learned is that when someone cracks to a billion pieces, there is no going back to who you were before. And I tried to do that
No,
for
no.
years. It was like I just need to, because I was high functioning, I was successful, I was happy, I was very active, and man, all of that gone, gone.
Hmm.
So then
Yeah.
then it was, so what do I want now? But it took me
Mm.
years to figure out that I couldn't go backwards. I had to reimagine.
No.
And again, it came to that psychosocial education that
Hmm.
had me understand that. And my question, my largest question is why are these things not being taught in the
Oh,
hospitals
I
for people
wish.
who are psychiatric patients, for people who are having major issues, and in a world that pushes people well beyond what they're capable of many times, who, as you say, there's so much going on insofar as a nervous system because of all of the sensory stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
It almost feels like we're set up for this kind of fall. And, my thing is, if we can teach our children things like RAP, things like the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, things about their nervous systems and how to manage themselves. But the fact of the matter is I've tried to get this out. People aren't interested because they don't recognize until they actually crack
Are
into
in
a
it.
million pieces that it
Yeah.
even matters. And that's so sad because if we could catch the kids, if we
Hmm.
could have the parents teach the kids this consciously of where their nervous system is at, what's happening inside of them, how to take care of themselves, how to say no when people put unnecessary pressure on them to
Hmm.
overperform. That really, I think, is the biggest gift that we could give any kids. But and I gotta be honest, I probably wouldn't know that either had I not been through what I was. I was the worst when it came to push, push, push. And I'm gonna tell you, I taught my children to push
Push,
beyond their
push, push.
boundaries. Let's
Mm.
go, let's go, let's go. What do you mean you can't do that? Of course you can do that. You can do anything you want. And that's not the case because we are
Hmm.
restricted by our nervous systems. And if we're not
Yeah.
aware of what the warning signals are, that we have had too much, then somewhere along the line, it's going to come back and it's going to bite us in the ass. And that's all there is to
Yeah.
it. And I wish for that not to happen. That on top of intergenerational trauma is like, I prefer not to have that happen to my
Of
children and my
course. Of
grandchildren.
course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, yes, the definition of a cycle breaker, and that's what I said. And I think knowing that's another reason why like you as you don't know the bravery that takes like to you it was yes survival instincts, but for me as an outsider looking in I'm like that takes like what you're doing is impacting your potential your grandchildren, your whole lineage has changed because of you. I mean that's a beautiful thing, very hard and difficult, and I would not wish what you experienced upon you, but it's like almost like you kind of have to like as you said that knowing. that everybody has in their healing. Like that was your body just being like, nope, like you're the one. And, sometimes you're granted that, you're the one and you have to kind of grin and bear it. But I love that you also said too, this nervous system regulation. There's a new like post going out there on the social medias. And I agree with it that nervous system regulation is the new generational wealth. Like instead of,
Yes.
passing on money and all this stuff, like if you could, and what you just said makes so like is correct. Like if you can teach our children how to navigate this crazy world we live in and be regulated through it, that is
Yes.
worth more than gold. I tell people all the time, you could give me $1 billion. If you could say, Danielle, you will be dysregulated your whole life, but you get $1 billion, or you can be regulated your whole life. And I would choose regulation. You can't, there is not amount of money you could put on me feeling calm and regulated and in my own body and acting from
Yes.
my core self. Like there's not a dollar amount like that you could, I
Yeah.
would never sell that for anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that that awareness comes because you know what it feels like
To
to
be,
not
oh,
be
yeah.
regulated. And I think a lot of people do. They just don't recognize that they could do it differently and still be able to function in this world. I
Yes. And
think
even
during school and our parents teach us just go, go, go,
go,
go,
yep,
go.
go, push, push. As you said, you taught, that's how I hate to say it. I know you mentioned too, your parents were brought up more with that anxiety. Of course, you have to look at the
Yeah.
cultural perspective. Like I remember
Yes.
when I first joined the workforce, it was 2008, in the States, the financial crisis. So
Oh, yeah.
that's why I have kind of, they call it like that hustle culture, that keep going, push more, don't take time off. That's where that, like, and I have to actively
Yes.
stop myself these days, being an entrepreneur and a student and trying to have manage my life, to be like, Danielle, you can't push through it. You have to stop. You have to carve out time for self-care. Some days you have to carve out a day where you literally do nothing. Like or you don't have something scheduled because your body needs it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that awareness, unlearning what we've
Mm,
learned in the
yeah.
push, 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 let's go, let's go, let's go. And there literally is, from my point of view, this condensation from people of, well, you're not trying hard enough, you're not doing
No, it's
enough, you're not
yeah,
this enough,
no.
you're not that enough. And it's like, I remember when I was working in IT, I remember thinking to myself that it was like a badge of honor when I was really busy.
Yes.
I
Yes.
was really busy. I was an entrepreneur, so I had, people that worked for me. I had all this stuff going on. And, in order to show success, you had to be like stretched beyond because
Yes.
people wanted you. And
Yep.
that was all
Yep.
part of it. And man, that was not helpful when push came to shove. That was absolutely not a helpful state or mindset for me to have along the way. It was a horrible mindset. And it's taken me so long to unlearn the crap that I learned in just go, go, go. Nobody ever spoke to me about pushing too hard. Nobody ever.
Yep.
And I see my children and they push,
Hmm.
not all of them, but they push and it's like, man, I hope that you're doing things to balance yourself out. And this
Yeah.
was not something, had I not been through what I've been through, I would never have I would never have brought that up because it's not culturally something that's honored. That's
No,
all.
as and you and 100. I always say this, unfortunately, like, and I know Canada is different, but capitalism got the best of us. That's, I think, the more and more and more the dopamine. I mean, I could have a whole another podcast conversation about this whole thing, and that's why we do. You're right. We have to unlearn this
Yes.
this culture, because that's what it is. It's culture. Like we create, not maybe you and I, but generations have created this thing, and it's like, for what? Like, and I actually will share, I think, I'm sure, I don't know how old your children are or your grandchildren, but the younger generations, like the I know they're getting a lot of like feedback or judgment, but the like the Gen Zers, they're
Hmm.
in corporate America in the States, they are, if they are pushed, they're like, nope. They know their boundaries. Like they're very, I will say, like
A
they're
hundred
really
percent.
they're standing up for themselves, which is a different experience than like the boomer generation who was just like, yep, just go to work and you have a job, you're lucky to have a job, all that stuff.
Yep.
And so there, I think we're gonna see a shift in like years to come of what we're talking about right now. And I think it's needed.
I think so too, because I think that there are a lot of people that fall off the edge and they're not being honored for what they've done in their lives. And I think that I think that there, how do I put this? I feel like the culture is there to benefit certain people and not others, and that the people who fall off are from the people that benefit. They are, yeah, man, like it's fine. We can just replace you with somebody else. And I think if we all teach each other that and to be aware of that, that it would be much better. If we have people that are willing to go out there and beat themselves into the ground, um, yeah, I don't think that benefits other people, and I certainly don't think it benefits them. I think we
I
all
agree.
need to have a certain culture of self-awareness and self-care, and that's it. And when you come back and you talk about, um, I don't know why I'm losing my words, but I am. When you
Self-awareness,
talk
self-care,
about um, people who are just trying
cultural,
to get
like
ahead.
push. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that whole thing, that culture of more, 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 which is
Mhm.
surrounding us everywhere. Do you want to
Yep,
size
it's
up?
everywhere.
Do you want
Yeah.
to do this? Do you want to do that? And having more is better and all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, man, I think that we all need to rethink that whole thing and think more about what's good for us all collectively. It is not good for all of us collectively to be
Mm.
driving ourselves into the ground at the end of the day. We don't get anything from it. And I tell you, my
Nope.
children have gone through a lot of shit. Sorry, my
No, no,
apologies.
you
They've
can curse.
gone
You can
through,
curse.
thank
No,
you.
curse,
They
curse
have
away,
gone
curse
through a
away.
lot.
I'm good.
They
Yeah.
have gone through a lot of their own trauma because of my trauma.
Mm,
And honestly, if I had known prior that
mm,
I needed to be aware of this, it would have saved everybody so much grief, so much
mm.
pain. And yeah, I just wish that people would understand that out there, it's so important to recognize ourselves first. It's not selfish.
No,
Recognize
no,
that we need to take care of our own health and that we aren't benefiting by pushing ourselves to the point that we drop. That's not
no.
beneficial to anybody except the people who gain financially from that.
Yep. And I know talking, I could talk to you about it. Unfortunate, and I know it's similar in Canada, the system, think of like the corporate America is a system, and that system rewards everything you just said. They reward pushing more. They reward, breaking your back for your job. That's what's like, that's where you get a promotion, and that conditioning is harmful for our mental and physical health,
Yes,
you know?
if you're not aware of what your nervous system is doing. There were so many warning signs for me prior to
Mm,
my collapse. And I'm not going to say that I wouldn't have had the same collapse. I probably would have, but probably I would have gotten myself out of the situation before I did because
mm,
I recognized that my nervous system was just, man, I was pushing so hard in so many different directions. It was almost it was frantic. It was
mm.
frantic.
Yeah, it
And
was just,
that
yeah.
on top of, being harassed, being yeah, all of the horrible things that were happening to me at the time, if I had been aware of the nervous system and the role that it plays to my health, not just mental health. People talk about mental health. It isn't actually just mental health. I don't think you can have a mental health issue without having physical or physiological health issues along with it. And that's just it. So
I
to
mean,
be able
I
to
agree with you wholeheartedly.
yeah, to be able to see, and there's such a horrible stigma to it. And it's like, man, it looks to me like you need to give yourself a break. Let's take a look at what's going on in your world, in your life, and let's talk about where you can shave things off and maybe leave them for another day. And that's a hard thing to do because we are programmed, and I'm using that
Yeah,
word specifically. We are programmed to push
100%.
ourselves. And at the end of the day, when we collapse, there is no system in place, not one in place, that will make sure, that will care that you've collapsed. They won't. And that's just all there is to it.
Yep.
Those systems that are in place are meant to discard you and get a better and more, I don't know, naive and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed version of you, and they'll just slot you right into that job and away you go again.
Yep. It's just a cycle repeating itself. It's just like, yeah, take a little bit break,
Yeah.
heal. Like it's like I always say too, with the talking about like, mental health and I love that you brought up physiological, mind, body. It's all
Yeah.
interconnected. Mental health, physical health, same thing to me, but for some I get it for the world out there, maybe they don't think that, and that's okay. I have my own journey and my own view of it,
Yep.
but the medical model, treat, diagnose, heal, is so much different than the mental health model. That doesn't work with mental health. I've
Yeah.
found it with my own lived experience as a therapist. Like, yes, treat, diagnose, and I will say the medical health model is the model that it has dominance in society. The all right, treat, diagnose, go on your way, heal. But that's, and I'm sure, as you know, with mental health, healing, that's not how healing works for your body. If you broke a leg, yes, like different, or you're healing from a cut, yes. But mental health and true healing and trauma, that's not how healing from trauma works, you know?
Well, and yeah, like with a therapeutic thing, you break your leg, there is like a quantifiable and set way of healing that happens. But when you're talking about body, mind, soul, and trying to heal the wounds that happen there, that's not
Mhm.
something that you can like scientifically and
No,
quantifiably
no, yeah, there's no
say,
exactly,
do A,
exactly.
do B, do C, do D. And, our system, I feel, would like to say, well, if you just take this pill, then you'll be fine.
Nope.
In fact, maybe you will be. I'm going to say, well, I was being stalked and so on. Pills were very helpful to me because I was freaked out and they calmed me down. But there became a point in time where it was like the pills were damaging me, and that wasn't good. So I needed other tools. So, and the fact that I wasn't given those other tools by the people who were considered authorities or experts in the field, looking back on it retrospectively, I think that was a horrible injustice done to me. I think it would have been much better if I had been taught what the nervous system does. And I think I've said all this anyways
But yeah,
already.
no, but that's why I
But
think, I mean, I don't want to like, it's similar to you, like beat down a dead horse, but it's like that's
yes,
why I feel like it's like no, like get to know your nervous system. Know what like that to me, like and unfortunately sometimes you do have to get to those dysregulated places to know, be like, I don't want to be here. Like I don't
yes,
like, unfortunately, I hate it does take getting triggered. Sit with your discomfort. I know it's really
yes,
hard, trust me. It's easier to, as I said, take a and I don't want people to be in physical or emotional pain. I'm not saying that. But
yeah,
yeah, like, it's easier to take a Xanax, to go grab a drink, to do whatever to ease the but no, maybe sit in that stress and be like, okay, what is my body telling me right now? Where do I feel
yes,
it most? Do I feel it in my chest? Do I feel it, try work doing grounding and breath work first before going for that Xanax or pill. And I'm not saying there's no shame in that. Like I always say, like, like I'm prescribed Xanax and I'm like, yeah, in a pinch, if I'm really, really activated, yeah, that's my like Tylenol for my headache.
yeah,
But I'm not recreationally taking Xanax every day. Like that, as I said, that's my Tylenol or Advil
yes,
for if I'm having a really extreme experience, which I haven't had in many times. Drink some water. I would tell people, drink a glass of water. Like so
yeah,
simple. And then also too, I go back, going full circle, time. We need
yeah.
time. Our nervous system needs time to work through through whatever emotion or whatever state it's in. It needs time.
And it's that whole balance, I think, too, right? Like, so for me, it's somatics. I know if I turn my right foot in, that I'm being activated in some way and that there could be a response that is not good. So for
Hmm.
me, that means that my higher brain is not inactive. So the way that I learn to do things is to balance it off by enacting my higher brain. For other people whose minds race, maybe it means getting up and moving so that you've got the body coming in. So for me, I feel like any kind of reaction to something is either very heavy somatic or very heavy brain or emotion. So to balance it off, you figure out a plan of, okay, when my mind starts racing, maybe what I'll do is, walk outside or get myself a glass of water or whatever. I don't know. Everybody
Yeah.
finds their way. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what you said. Like for works for me, like works for you. You know what I mean? If it,
Yes.
I said, and you own that. Like, and then don't ever, if anybody judges you or anybody like, I'm like, you don't, I'm like, you're not in my body. You're not feeling my feelings. So, like
Yes.
that's what I say to people all the time. Don't, so you have no room to, and I do think, unfortunately, and even with my own mental health, I always say I'm an advocate. I remember vividly this happened last year, and actually something was medically was going on with me, but I remember I was having like sleepless nights for like, and I was like, I'm everybody struggles with sleep every once in a while. But
Mm-hmm.
I was not, I like, it was maybe like my fourth night of like not, like, I was just really jittery.
Mm.
And I was like, there's something going on here. And I actually told my dad, and I said, Dad, I was like, and I actually thought, ironically, thought it was my anxiety because I was very anxious for like the last 3 months. And I was working with my psychiatric nurse to like get me, just because that's what, and I was talking with my therapist of like, maybe this is I was being re-traumatized somehow or some trauma was coming up. Like I was doing all the things that I knew that I was doing.
Yeah.
But it ended up being I had actually like was it was I remember 2 o'clock in the morning. I was at my father's house because I stay with my father sometimes. And said, Dad, I was like, you need to take me to the emergency room. He was like, what? And I was like, I don't know what's going on in my body right now, but you need to go. And long story short, my potassium had dropped so low. There was actually something chemically going on that like my body was, they were like, if you didn't come now, they were like, you could have went into, cardiac arrest. Like this could have been serious. And I was like, see, I was like, and that is why it's always important to listen to your body. Because I never,
Yes.
did kind of push it off for a little bit, but I was like, see, something is going, like, it was like my body was just like, danger, something's going on here. And I wasn't listening because, but it could unfortunately be something very medical going on. Um,
Yes, and I think people who have struggles with mental health or, trauma or whatever it may happen to be, a lot of times can default to this is something going on with my mental health when in fact it could well be something that is a physical issue. So
yes.
not to automatically put everything down to, I have PTSD, therefore this must be my PTSD. And yeah,
Mhm.
potassium you said, right, was down
It
low?
was potassium. My potassium was low.
That's a big
My
deal.
electrolytes, yeah. And that's the first time, Monica, I've ever heard. I'm like, I knew what potassium is, obviously, but I was like, this is never. And they were like, oh my gosh, I think you're supposed to be at a 4. I was at like a 2, and they were like,
Oh, wow.
how did it get dropped this low? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and then of course, I went, I got admitted for a couple. It wasn't crazy, just a couple of days testing, and then they got my potassium back.
Still,
But
yeah,
it
that's
was
that's a
like
big deal.
yeah, it was like I was like, "Oh my gosh, like something must have triggered it." So yeah, it's always good to listen to your body, and that's I just share that story to say advocate for yourself because my dad was like, "Oh no,
Absolutely.
like, not to say didn't want to take, but he was like, "Are you like he's I was like, "No." I was like, "I need to go now." And he was like, "Okay."
Yeah,
It was like so I had to advocate for even like, like cuz it sometimes yeah, and then and not to be like I prove you right, dad, but I was like something was wrong,
absolutely it was. Yeah.
you know?
Well, I'm glad that you were able to do that and that you got your
Yeah.
levels back up again.
Yeah,
That's
everything's
great
good
news.
now. All is good. All is good. But yeah,
Fabulous.
it was just a little scary experience, and I was like, "Ooh, like I have to be careful about, now." And now I'm more, I'm aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah, which is good. And again, that's all part of it. It's that consciousness of being
Hmm.
aware of what you need to be aware of. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, Monica, this has been I could talk to you all day. Literally, I could talk to you about this stuff all day. And thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so vulnerable. I'm honored to have heard it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me on your show. And yeah, it's been lovely chatting with you as it always is. So thank you,
Yeah.
Danielle.
Absolutely. And as usual, everybody, you can find the Feeling and Healing podcast on YouTube as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify.